The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Welcome, everyone, to the Center for Educational Media and Professional Development at the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University. We are here today with the ELL Collaborative, which is an initiative to provide professional development to teachers of English learners. So we welcome you, and we welcome viewers on the live stream as well. We also welcome viewers on ERC at MT. We are pleased to have Dr. Christine Tennyson here today to present. Dr. Tennyson has worked in Rutherford County at the district level supporting teachers of English learners. She is currently the assistant principal at Laverne Middle School. She has quite a lot of background in supporting teachers of English learners, and today she's going to present to us on the topic of SIOP. So, Dr. Tennyson, welcome.
So how many of you here have ever been trained in SIOP? Have gone to some sort of SIOP training, whether through Pearson or for the CAL? Okay, so some of you, this may be old hat, and I am going to present probably about 7 days worth of training I've had all together in an hour and 15 minutes. So there will probably be some things that I leave out, and it won't be quite as interactive as SIOP normally is. So for that, I apologize. Now, I know some of you have probably been trained through your educational program maybe and have been introduced to SIOP that way. But we are going to kind of talk about how SIOP really, their intention is to weave language and quality teaching into planning and all those things. So I'm going to give you a little background of me. I am currently assistant principal at Laverne Middle School in Laverne, Tennessee. I am a graduate of Trevecca is where I've gotten my doctorate. I've worked in ESL education for 20 years. Last year I was the ESL Title I coach. Mr. Corey Mullins is our new Title I coach at the district level. And I have been on the 10 TESOL board maybe 10 years. I'm a past president, and Joseph Winery is our current president. And this summer, early in the fall, we'll be sending out, I'm going to do a plug for 10 TESOL. We will be looking for new members to run on our board, as always. And so we ask you to keep that in mind if you would ever like to serve professionally to support English learners in the state of Tennessee. We are always looking for new people, or don't feel like, even if this is your first year teaching, don't feel like you don't have something to offer, because we all do. So in good SIOP fashion, I have my content and my language objectives. So participants will be able to discuss the 8 components of SIOP briefly. And then participants you will be able to evaluate your school's readiness for SIOP, or what parts of SIOP they may already be doing, even if you all don't officially do SIOP. There are many parts of this that you all are already doing. You will be able to orally discuss the 8 components and share your own personal areas of strength. And then you'll be able to write down some ways that your school can begin implementing one or more of the SIOP components, okay? So those are my goals for you all at the end. We'll check back with ourselves and see if these are the things that we have done. So SIOP began, how many of you everyone in here hopefully went to some sort of ESL school and you're familiar with Crashen and sheltered instruction. And so SIOP began soon after that. by Echevarria, Voigt, and Short. And their idea was to create a model. So because sheltered instruction, when we cluster our students together, if it's haphazard, we know it cannot be successful. So their goal was to create a way to promote language development for all students. And I really am a proponent of SIOP for the fact that I think we have to get away from the fact it's just for ESL. It is for any child who needs to build academic language. Is there any child in your school that does not need to build academic language? And I don't even just mean those are the at-risk, the special education, the tier students, and the others. I mean our high kids need to build academic language as well. So the way that SIOP is designed, it's designed to build that academic language. There's a lot of research around it. It was first created in the 1990s. It was field tested for over 4 years. They rolled it out in the late 90s. Many of us, it was something new in the early 2000s. Many of us went to training in the early 2000s. I think the first time I went to training was in 2012. As an official SIOP Pearson 3-day training, and our school was trying to move toward a SIOP model. But I want to reiterate that it was not just created for those emergent bilinguals and our ESL students. It was created for all students to build academic language. All right. There are 8 components. That first page shows you the breakdown of the 8 components, just a very, very brief overhaul. And we know that that's not necessarily enough. But it will give you, I'm going to go through each component and I'm going to emphasize some of the things that I think are extremely important and that we miss, that are important for any sort of good program. All right, so lesson prep. Every lesson we know begins with getting and prepping our lesson. Well, the first thing you have to decide is in that lesson or in that unit, what are you going to teach and how are your students going to let you know that they've learned what you've taught, okay? And for content, we tend to do content objectives. All of our great content teachers rely on those content objectives, but they forget the language component. You have several sheets in your packet that can help you dive deeper into that objectives. Because here's my thing. If you don't know what the objective is for that lesson, guess who else is not going to know it? Your students. There's a lot of research on teacher clarity and Hattie, and I give you some numbers on this PowerPoint. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of knowing what your objectives are. And also making sure they're tied to your assessment. How are you going to assess your objectives? This goes, I think, all the way back to Madeline Hunter, if anybody remembers Madeline Hunter and studying her and how she did lesson prep. This is nothing new. We all know this. Also, parts of lesson are the content, the concepts you want them to learn, and then your supplementary materials. These are just all the things you're bringing in. Everything you're bringing in to make sure your lesson. And the one thing about SIOP is it's content-based, teaching language through content. All right, so the what and how of the objectives. You have content objectives or content standards that turn into your content objectives, and then you have your language objectives. Your content standards are not, how many of you in ESL use the content standards for your grade level to determine what you're going to teach? Okay? How many of you use just whatever it is you want to use because you like to teach it? I see some honesty here. And one of the most important things about SIOP is that we remain in the content for that grade level. Our goal as teachers of English learners is for them to not need ESL anymore. That's our goal. And we know that the only way for us to truly prepare them for grade level is to remain in that grade level content. All right? I was a literacy teacher. I had a good friend who was a science teacher. I taught with novels and other things that were picked by me because of the students that I taught and I knew them, but I always remained in those content standards for literacy, and those were the ones that I went toward, right? So I cannot emphasize enough, look at those content standards for your grade level and work on those, and you're teaching language through those. As ESL teachers, we emphasize the language. As the content teachers, they emphasize the content. But we're still using the content standards in whatever way that applies to you, okay? Obviously, with newcomers, there's always that different, they're a little different. Newcomers are very unique, right? They're their own group. Okay, so you always have, how is it the language? What is it I want you to do? What language did I have for you all to be able to do at the end of, or during my process? What is it I want you to be able to do? What language do I want you to be able to use?
English.
English, but how do I want, good. How do I want you to use your English? I forgot, that was a bad question. Thank you for clarifying for me. How do I want you to use your English?
Orally, written.
Orally and written, all right? Obviously, you all are going to be reading some of the stuff off the packet I gave you, perhaps later, perhaps not now. So my goal is for teacher clarity. So if I'm clear in what I want for you all to do, then you all know what is expected by the end of my lesson. You can't be clear to students unless you have really strong objectives, okay? You can tell I work a lot with teachers because this is something I drive home to my faculty a lot when I do some trainings. All right. So let's talk about building background. That's your second component. I didn't number these. So building background are how many of us, that's where we struggle. We know our kids, know those standards, but then they get to whatever exam it is they're taking, and they pick up a piece of science, social studies, literature that they don't have the background to understand what they're reading, even if they're reading at grade level, right? That's always been our strongest barrier to true English proficiency. So it's our responsibility, and that's one of the things we do through SIOP, is to build that background. And there are so many different ways, and I'm going to bet everyone in this audience has a different way. All right? Well, you can't build background if you don't know your students, and we know that's one of the main 6 components of the TESOL, if you all have seen the new TESOL, 6 components. We have to know our students so that we can hook learning onto what they already know. So we have to know what they already know and how they know it. And then we have to pre-teach, reteach some things sometimes, because that one killer is vocabulary. And I could do a whole day's session on vocabulary as well, and so many of you could, as hopefully too. And so maybe that's an idea for you to present this summer for Dr. Clark. Somebody has some good vocabulary, because we know vocabulary is one of the greatest struggles of building background. But I really want to talk about the difference between activating background and building background. So one of my favorite novels to teach was The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. If you've ever, has anybody ever read that one? It's a Kate DiCamillo novel. Obviously, my students are not a bunny. So they can't necessarily identify with the whole bunny thing, but the bunny is taken away from his home, put in a new situation several times. And so we know this is something our children go through. So one of the things I did was, okay, I'm going to activate their knowledge of journey, the life journey, the change, and all those things. And I use that to teach the literacy standards. I'm not teaching the novel, I'm teaching the literacy standards. And then if anybody's ever read Esperanza Rising, has anybody read Esperanza Rising? Okay, Esperanza Rising has been my go-to novel for 20 years. Okay, it's my favorite one. It is an amazing story. My boys, my girls, everybody likes it. It's about a 4th or 5th grade level. If you ever need a great novel to read, then that's one. Okay, the difference in both of those, I'm activating the background of my students, because I know they already know about movement and immigration and those kinds of things, and I'm teaching literacy skills, but I don't have to necessarily teach the background. I had a colleague one time ask me, why do you teach Esperanza Rising? It's so hard. The themes in that are so hard. And I said, not for my students. They get it. They get the loss. They get the struggle. They get I was a straight A student in my home country, and now I'm lucky I can pass. Right? So all of those themes are going on in that novel, so I've activated their background to teach them literacy. Now, math is hard. I know my students are going to struggle in math, so I pre-teach the vocabulary that I know they're going to see in the content classroom. That's building background, so that when they go to that lesson, they've already been exposed to those words, and I spent some time building that background so that when they get ready for that. And I really did, when I taught 8th grade, I worked with the 8th grade math teacher, and I made sure that we talked about some of those things, all right? So that I could build that background for them so that when they started to see those words in their math class, it wasn't brand new to them. That's the difference between activating and building. But those are important. We have to tap into those for our students. All right, so what is key vocabulary? And I took this term, all of these are I'm like, okay, we can talk about tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. We can talk about content. We can talk about all those things. But really, when we talk about vocabulary, if you want your children to discuss or write about a subject, what is the vocabulary they're going to need to be successful in that lesson and to support future learning in the content? So we can, that's really what that whole vocabulary is. When you're going through and you're picking vocabulary, however many you pick, we know there's all sorts of research that goes maybe 8 words, maybe 10 words, no more. We know we shouldn't. We all had the spelling tests, you know, and I can make a good argument for why we should do family spelling tests. But, you know, we don't do those things anymore. We don't give them lists and say, memorize these and define these. We know that teaching vocabulary is so much more than that. As an educator, I want to make sure that I know that what words are going to struggle with as well. Love those multiple meaning words, right? Okay? The word chart can mean many different things depending on the content. There are so many different words, and we could do a whole day's training on vocabulary. All right, and here is the one that really hones in with us. Is it comprehensible? Anybody here ever have that student say, Miss Tennyson, if you would just slow down. All right? Right? And when we work with content teachers, how many of you all are in the classroom as the ESL teacher, but you're also kind of the ESL coach at your school because there's nobody there? That's just, how many of you all have ESL coaches at your school? So most of us are the teacher and the coach, right? And then there's that whole beautiful Southern drawl that we have. All right? My mother is from New York and my father's from Connecticut, but I had moved down here when I was 3 and I'm a Southerner. So I picked it up. The funniest thing is my students laugh at me when I speak Spanish because I guess that my Southern drawl goes into when I speak Spanish as well. But we have that Southern drawl. Comprehensible input is also that clear expectations. I explained it. I hate it when teachers say this. This was always used to drive me nuts. I explained it. You weren't listening. That's why you don't understand. No, ma'am, I was listening to you because I was taught respect. I just have no idea what you said because you were using words and terminology. You were talking too fast. I just didn't understand you. And good students don't always understand us. If we don't have clear expectations, if we don't explain it clearly, our students are not going to understand us. And then we could go strategies and scaffolding and those kinds of things, techniques to make the content comprehensible. Okay? Can you show me? Show me, don't tell me, have me do it, all of those things. All those go into comprehensible input. We know that. We're the choir. I'm talking to the choir in this room, but we've got to help get that that idea out to our fellow teachers. I'm not teaching you comprehensible input at this exact moment because you all don't know it. I'm hoping so that you can explain it to your fellow teachers, because we are the coaches. I taught in the classroom for 18 years, and there was nobody that worked with my grade level content area teachers but me and my team, right? I have 3 teachers at my school. And I wish I had, as an administrator, I thought, oh, I'll have more time to work. No, behavior takes up most of my time. I have to rely on my ESL team even now, because that's one of the responsibilities that comes with being an ESL teacher for most of us. All right, strategies. Strategies are just good ways to teach ESL, that we know these. Scaffolding comes in here. When we are planning that lesson, what are our strategies? And many of us have go-to strategies. So I'm going to pause right here, and I want somebody to tell me one of their go-to strategies every time they think of a lesson. Think of, okay, you know it's above their heads. What are you going to do to get them there? So does anybody want to share a go-to strategy they always use? A scaffold they always use?
Pictures.
Pictures. Thank you very much. I was hoping somebody would say that. How many times have we preached this to our fellow faculty members and they still don't do it? So if you're listening out there and you're grade level teachers, please, pictures. Pictures is the greatest strategy. We know this. Even for our obviously I teach at Laverne Middle, and so we have some students that have a different background than is what is expected of a piece of text that they're about to read. All students need some sort of picture to help them kind of visualize what's going on in that story. All right. Scaffolding. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about scaffolding, and then a variety of questioning. I was very impressed with one of my faculty members who had come up with some really great ways to get students to ask better questions. She had them play basketball. They had to earn the right to play basketball. So sometimes on those variety of questions, when the students need to be doing that more as much as we do, and then we need a motivator. Let's face it, engagement, not a SIOP, but we know engagement goes all the way around, right? Okay. So let's talk about scaffolding. This is the Notre Dame Cathedral, and I have not been back to see it since the fire, but I'm sure it would break my heart. If somebody's been there, I'm envious, but not necessarily that I want to see it. So first thing about scaffolding, it means we can keep high expectations. We've got to keep those grade level expectations in scaffolding. And for many of us who do pull out, scaffolding is teaching those same concepts sometimes at a different reading level. All right, that's one of our biggest scaffolds that we do, or trying to chunk the text, some things like that. But I think our ELA coordinator for Rutherford County said to me, and she is not incorrect, sometimes we over scaffold. We may not do that, but sometimes our teachers do. Because we know scaffolding is supposed to be temporary. Eventually, they will fix Notre Dame and it will not still look like this, right? We hope. How many of you have ever been to Europe? And I've been, so I had some opportunities when I was young, and I went to Europe both when I was 15 and then when I was 20 when I studied there. And I went, both times there was scaffolding, but it was never on the same building, right? Especially in Florence. I swear there's always lots of scaffolding in Florence. So we know it's temporary, but we know sometimes when we teach that new concept, even though they're able to read in the old concept or the old content, we have to put some new scaffolding back on, right? So how do we get this across to our teachers? Well, that's what the ILP was designed for. That ILP hopefully helps us know what the appropriate scaffolding is for our students, and then when we share that with the teachers that we have, that hopefully helps them. Everybody redid their ILPs come, December, right? They went back and they revisited and they revamped their ILPs. All right, because that's only one of many things that we have to do, including, everybody ready for WIDA? All right, how many of you all are on Twitter? Is anybody on Twitter? And if you aren't, you should be. If anybody knows me or has heard me present before, I'm a huge Twitter bug. I discovered Twitter in about 2016, and I have grown professionally more being on Twitter than I have probably except for 10 TESOL, and I will always give credit to 10 TESOL for professional growth for me in my early years. But Twitter has sincerely helped me grow. And if you follow Tan, and I can never say Tan's name properly, but he also has a great blog entitled empoweringels.com. He creates these amazing visuals for us to talk about scaffolding. I'm not going to bore you and read everything up here, but there's definitely different ways for us to scaffold: sensory, interactive, graphic. You may scaffold a piece of text. You may scaffold the assessment. Scaffolding is just how is it you're changing it just a tad bit without losing the integrity of the content in order to help your English learner arrive at the goals. All right. I am showing an extremely poor example of this component of SIOP right now, and I want to apologize for you all. I really wanted to get through everything. There's a little bit of interaction I have at the end. Teachers, when we present to other teachers, we are the worst about integrating interaction. I do one on teacher clarity, and it's a lot more interactive. I talk a lot about objectives, and it's a lot more interactive. But for today's sake, I really wanted to squeeze it into time. But for our students, how many of you, when we went to recording yourselves, your scores went down because nobody could really use to talk like that into the microphone, and they would get really, yeah. All right, so the best way to improve that is to have them talking. Have them practice obviously into the microphone, but just practicing in general. Opportunities for discussion, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in a smaller group in our classes. The worst thing I see as a principal is when I see the ESL kids clustered in a group in a class, a regular ed class, and they are not expected to talk. The best teachers I see in my school are those that expect every student to orally participate in some sort of way, right? So I cannot stress how much interaction works. Part of that's going to be grouping. Part of that's going to make sure we clarify exactly what it is that we expect. And we know that sentence stems and those kinds of things really help. But the worst thing I see also is I've got this great packet of sentence stems, so I'm just going to kind of laminate a few, and they really are not intentional to the content that we are teaching. When we want interaction and we give them those scaffolds for talking, we want to make sure they're intentional for that. And I know I'm a little preachy there, so I'll apologize for that. And then the one that I haven't read up there is wait time. We know we want our classes to move quickly, so we want to make sure that but we have to give everybody enough wait time, okay? So what are we gonna do when we go home? We're gonna make sure our kids are talking. You guys all do it, but let's make sure we're encouraging our other fellow teachers to do it too. Practice and application. This is basically when you teach, you're gonna make sure they're practicing. Practice makes progress. Practice does not make perfect. With practice and application, we need to help them apply their learning. We need to integrate all our language skills. We need lots of hands-on material. It needs to be engaging and apply what they're learning. If anyone ever looks at the math-focused documents, if you want your children to gain mastery in math in the state of Tennessee, almost always that last one is, can they apply whatever math concept they're learning to the real world? And yes, we do use math. I don't do long division because God invented calculators at some point in time, and they were, they come on our phone, but for the most part, I know how to do it. So we want our students to understand what they're learning and why they're learning it. That's kind of the applying what they're learning. All right. Lesson delivery. We want to make sure we're clear. We want to talk. We want to keep our students engaged, like the basketball. If you get so many questions right, whoever wins, you get 3 shots at the basketball. And then the lesson pace appropriate to the age, the learning level, not too slow, not too fast. If I taught Esperanza Rising to my 6th graders, I taught it differently than I might to my 8th graders. If I taught it to my intermediates, I'm definitely going to teach it differently than I teach it to my advanced students. You know, we know all these things. And then my favorite, review and assessment. So, here's my question for you. How does review and assessment, what part of the beginning of SIOP does review and assessment connect to? I don't know if I said it in the beginning. So what?
The objective.
Your objectives, exactly. Thank you. Either he already knew that or he was listening well, so I appreciate that. So, objectives. Your review and assessment must be assessing what your objectives were. This is the idea behind many of these state tests that they give. They give us these content standards, and the concept, the real world, you know, we want them to align. And we know that doesn't always happen, okay? The best assessments, though, are not those formal assessments. They're informal, right? How many of you give those informal assessments? Because you're constantly tracking your students. So, what? Right, you're going to go over to that student, you're going to watch them. She's actually taking notes, or she's typing an email, I don't know. Hopefully she's taking notes. But she's over here, she's engaged, and she's taking notes. So we know our assessments have to be tied to our objectives, and we have to give lots of feedback. And that feedback really has to be individual so that student can grow. All right, so that's our 8 components. How many of you are the only teacher at your school? Okay. How many of you have a team of teachers, at least 2 or more?
Can you repeat the second question?
How many of you are the only teacher at your school? Like you're the only ESL teacher? Obvious. I'm assuming I know there's one content teacher in here because she's going to help present co-teaching this afternoon, right? Yes? Is anybody else in here a content teacher, or is everybody else in here an ESL teacher? Or maybe I overjudged my audience, maybe, but I was making that I was talking to the choir and people that are already in ESL, right? How many? You're not in ESL? What do you teach?
I'm self-contained 3rd grade.
Self-contained 3rd grade. So you are the content teacher for everything. God bless you. Do you have an ESL teacher at your school that you work with, or are you also the ESL teacher in addition to the 3rd grade teacher? So you've got it going on right there, and by that I mean you've got a lot going on. So anybody else in here a content teacher or grade level teacher? So we have just the 2 of you all. And you all are a very unique bunch that you came here, and I'm so impressed that you came. But here's what I want you to think about. So I don't know how much time you all get to wander around your classroom or you get to know your fellow faculty members, but you've got to really figure out where they're strong at. If they're already really good at comprehensible input or strategies or scaffolding, then maybe that's not where you want to start. Mr. Mullins and I have talked about this. It takes about 2 years to get a school on a good SIOP, you know, with everybody doing it. And that's if you're fortunate enough to not have any teacher turnover. And we know that teacher turnover in education right now is at pretty much an all-time high and probably getting higher. But you've got to, and then sometimes you just got to find that one teacher. Ma'am, I know you love my ESL students, so I really want to work with you this year so that we can work on some things, and then maybe some other teachers can learn because you and I are working together. That's what you all have probably done. And it does go school-wide. So you may determine a person, you may determine a SIOP thing, but my suggestion is choose one component that you feel can make a difference to whomever you're working with. Because hopefully you all will think about SIOP and how you can apply it in your own classroom, but my goal is for you to think about SIOP and how could you help make the education for your students better in the content classes. How many, do I have any high school teachers in the building? Okay. We know high school teachers are probably one of the least malleable because they went to teach. I don't know why. I'm teaching my biology. I don't know why I have to teach language too. Well, I'm sorry. Don't you have your own biology vocabulary? Is that not language, right? Don't you want them to write a report at the end? Is that not language? How can you say you're not using language or not teaching language? Middle school, how many middle school people do we have in here? Yep, middle school teachers, depends on their background, you know. If they came in that K-6, or if you're like me and you're old and you have that K-8 certification where you had elementary, more of an elementary background, you're probably, you understand the necessity to help reach your students. But if they're those 7, 12, they may be like those high school people. I'm here to teach math. I don't know why I need to have my students speak. They can just, we know the new math standards have a lot of talking in it, but they want to just have those kids to, you know, to do that. So choose where you need to begin. Choose a person or a group of people that you want to work with. My suggestion, walk through those classrooms. Find that time in your day so that you can find one thing that they can work on. And I know that's hard. When you're in the classroom all day and we're all about to start giving WIDA, our time is extremely crunched. This may be something you want to think about and research and start after WIDA, after TN Ready, or next fall when you go back to school, because I think in the fall we do have a little bit more flexibility in our time, okay? Build on those components. Talk to your principal, obviously. If you're fortunate enough to have a principal who knows the needs of your ESL students and is willing to allow you to do this. So you have 2 sheets in the very back of your packet. So I want you to look at this sheet that has all these checks, and I'm not going to give you a ton of time because I really do want us to talk about some things. So you have this where it says a sheltered observation, protocol, model, implementation, self-assessment. Yes? Okay. So here's what I want you to do. We're just going to look at lesson prep. I want you to go through and I want you to grade yourself on what you think, and not yourself, actually. You can grade yourself or you can grade your school. Depends on what you want to do. What do you think your students' strengths are in lesson prep? Your teacher's strengths, sorry. Yeah. So let's just look at lesson prep. Can they define, display, and review content objectives? Do they have language objectives? In Rutherford County, we're visible learning, so we use some different terminology, but it's the same thing. Have they chosen content concepts appropriate for the age and educational level of the students? What are their supplementary materials that they're bringing? Have they adapted the content? And do they integrate language and the content well? So, rate your school, your fellow teachers. If you brought a co-teacher with you, you could rate your co-teacher. Somebody has their co-teacher with them, right? Yes? You do, yeah. She's coming in. All right. So, now, we are going to have a little bit of movement. I'm going to put some interaction in here. If you are born in January or February, stand up. If you're born in January or February, stand up. Okay. I want you to kind of come over here when I tell everybody to move. Y'all sit back down. If you were born in March or April, stand up. Oh, that's a good group. You're going to come back over here to where Corey is, kind of over by the handout thing, okay? That's May, June, July. All right, we're going to put May, June, and July together. All right, you guys can maybe back in the back. I know the camera won't be able to see all of you. August, September. Ooh, y'all are a big group. That's okay. Lots of good interaction. So we'll put August, September kind of up here.
babies.
The holiday. Oh, I have an August baby. Anyway, August and September, you are not wrong, ma'am. October, November, December. So we'll put October, November, see, just some December babies in there. We'll put you guys together as a group so you guys can kind of find a spot. So what I want you to do is we're just doing lesson prep because I really believe that's the one that I like to start with. That one, incomprehensible input, is the other one. So go to your groups and discuss those things that are your strengths and weaknesses at your school. And then you're going to stand there and I'm going to move on to the next activity.
Do like lesson objectives,
Right, the
but like
content
it's just there's
supposed to be today, but
If you finish and you want to go on to a different component and talk about it, pick one that you all want to talk about.
I couldn't see the teacher's face, I would lose half of what he or she would say. So.
Okay, I want you to finish up that thought and kind of try to end your conversation. I want you to go to I think it's the very last page in your packet, and it says a walk and talk exchange idea, okay? If you would like, here's the one I want you to really look at. The fourth one down, I want everybody to quickly think of one idea that you would like to take from SIOP and bring it back to your school. And if you I have 3 of my faculty members here with me, and I'm going to ask their opinion on this. So it's going to be for grade for y'all. No, just kidding. But I care about what the 3 of you all think. So here's my thing. If you're here as a team, my suggestion is to share with your principal something you think that could really help your ESL students in those content classes. And if you're at high school, sometimes high school content teachers can be a little intimidating, but we know we always are working in the best interest of our students. And I'm going to show you how it goes to evaluations too, so we'll talk about that in a minute. So write down one idea, and if a couple of you want to share it, I'm going to give you like a minute or 2 to do that, which is really quick. But one idea that you want to implement.
Wait time was a big thing because our students have to have time to formulate what they want to say.
Having the teachers actually write some of the objectives as well.
All right, I know this is quick, but I'm going to have you guys kind of come back to your seats and we're going to finish this up because we only have about a few minutes and I want to give you all some resources. So Christina Danko, who is one of our ESL instructional facilitator in Rutherford County, aligned SIOP with the Tennessee team rubric. Okay? So, because we know it comes down to our bottom line, whether it's our wallet or our evaluation, right? So when you are trying to motivate your teachers, sometimes if you come out for those evaluations and show, this might be a good way to motivate them. Plus, I think it's just good for us to know. So, how many of you would have liked to spend more time in interaction? Like talking to each other? And yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Sometimes you got to get that nitty-gritty out of the way. Did we meet our objectives? Do you feel like you could discuss all 8 components? Probably not. Do you feel like you could discuss a few of the components? All right. Do you feel like you can evaluate your school maybe a little bit and look for those things that maybe your school could do using the SIOP model? Do you feel like you did orally discuss, right? I did have you do that, and hopefully you did write it down. And if you didn't, I am truly not. You all are adults. This is not for a grade, right? All right, so there's a couple of things I just want to share with you. Pearson owns SIOP at this exact moment, and the 5th edition is out. So if you ever need a resource, or if you find a resource, the 4th edition is good too. I have both. CAL out of Washington, D.C., Corey and I went to this training not this past November, but the November before, and it was probably some of the best training I have ever been in. It was amazing. It was 4 days, and it was not cheap. But it was well worth the investment, and it's called SIOP Train the Trainers, so they were training us to come back and train, which was just an amazing thing. And if you get there's 2 links up here to it. I'm a big Twitter person, and last spring, we used this book and we discussed Twitter. We called it a meta round, and we embedded all of the books that we read through ELL Chat Book Club on Twitter into this. But if you search Twitter and you search ELL Chat Book Club 17.0, you're going to find a lot of resources. If you liked that graphic from Ton, you're going to find a lot more in there. He's the 3rd guy on the top row. He's the only guy in the picture. What am I saying? He actually was a Teach for America person, and now he teaches in Thailand. So I highly recommend that. And then at ELL Chat Book Club, if you want to professionally grow and you like to read, get on Twitter and follow that if that's all you do. A lot of information, really quick to go through. Does anyone have any questions? I got 2 minutes, a little bit less than 2 minutes. And remember, you can ask me and you can ask Corey. Corey taught this to his whole faculty last year at Smyrna Elementary. So, do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
First of all, great presentation, Chris. I haven't seen you present for a number of years because at 10 TESOL, it seems like I'm always kind of doing something else and we don't get a chance to see each other's presentations, but really good. I noticed that the word SIOP has an R in it. And is this a product and when you talk about the whole conference and everything, what is it that why is it registered, basically? So are there things that you have to buy to do this? Or are there SIOP cops that go around and catch you if you're using it and you haven't paid for it?
Once you have the book, and because really, it's a registered trademark, and what that means is I can't say I own SIOP. I always have to give Pearson. That's why I keep mentioning Pearson. It started out at CAL. When you go to train the trainer, you're allowed to train. You don't have to ask them permission to train. Because remember, CAL and Pearson both, I'm not sure about that, but I'm giving you all a presentation on information that I was given because when I went to train the trainer, that gave me permission to train. So, that's a good question.
So we can take things like this, implement them, and there's no obligation then to...
No, you can take anything, and if you need some help with some suggestions, email me. I've done several presentations. My suggestion is buy the book. That's my product endorsement, I guess, for the moment. So, does anybody have any other questions? That's a really good question. It is a registered trademark. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tennyson. This has been really informative. Thank you so much.